The following is a Spirit Street production.
The House versus NCAA, the ruling technically has come down. Everybody's agreed to it. So now we're just trying to decipher how much money each school is going to have to dole out, all that good stuff. Yeah, the fun stuff that we want to talk about when it comes to college athletics. Well, we're going to talk about some of that today and kind of decipher through it. We've got a couple of people here that are going to talk about how it's going to affect their schools, the Big 12, and college athletics moving forward. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Big 12 Insiders. Today, we've got Alec Busse, who covers Iowa State for 24/7, Jarret Johnson, who covers Texas Tech for 24/7 Sports. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Good. Thanks
for
having
great.
me on. Yeah, busy time of the year for us, right? We're
man,
busy
just
weekends.
Nonstop action. So I appreciate you guys taking the time, man. Like I said, we're just trying to decipher what's going on with all this crazy stuff, with college athletics. This House versus NCAA deal. I guess the settlement has technically been agreed to. Nothing has come out as far as dollar signs. So, Jarret, I'll start with you. How is this going to affect? And again, we don't know all the nuances and we don't know all the actual numbers, but how is this going to affect, in your eyes, Texas Tech moving forward?
That's a great question. There are so many unanswered questions with college athletics just in general, and this just opens up another can of worms. The numbers I heard was estimated $20 million per school in terms of revenue sharing. I don't know if that's what it's going to end up being, but right. To me, just big ball, big picture thinking, how are these schools going to allocate those resources? That's, to me, the question in terms of competitiveness. Like, and I assume, we even had Texas Tech's track coach, which it's Wes Kitley. He's a Hall of Fame track coach. They won the indoor national championship. His son is the offensive coordinator for the football team. So he is very embedded with Tech athletics. We had him on the radio show on Friday, and I asked him, and he basically was like, look, there are a lot of unanswered questions, but kind of went back to my first thought was, how are they going to allocate this money? Is most of it going to go towards football and men's basketball? But then what about women's sports? There's a lot of questions about Title IX, a lot of questions about how many of these schools and how many sports are they going to be able to keep moving forward? Like a school like Stanford, are they going to have 40 sports? Are they going to be able to afford all this? Right. There's just so many questions right now with college athletics, and this opens up another can of worms that I don't know that we have the answers as we sit here today.
Yeah, that would be my thing, is just the unknown is the scary part. Is because we know something's coming, but we don't know exactly what it is, Alec. I just, it's hard for us to put a stamp on what's happening, but I think schools kind of have to be in the mode of, okay, we got to do something. We know what the hammer is going to drop. So we got to start figuring out something, some kind of different type of a budget or something, because we know what's going to happen here. I guess my question is, do you think that schools are going to have to, and again, this is you, Alec, do you think schools are going to have to come together, like conferences, and everybody try to come together and come to an agreement? Because we've seen what that looks like in the past. They're not really interested in trying to do that. But in this case, it almost seems like they need to try to do that, because if they can get on the same page and have it be a little bit consensus everywhere, all the way around, then somehow we can make this work and everybody won't have to drop everything.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being more institution by institution based when it comes to the decisions that are made, because athletically, each school is motivated differently. And I think how you see each school choose to allocate the funds for the revenue distribution will be different at every school. I think some schools who care a lot about football and men's basketball are going to put more towards football and men's basketball. Of course, in the Big 12, Kansas cares more about basketball than any school in the league does. So you might see KU put more money to basketball, than a school like Utah, who maybe cares more about football, who wants to donate more towards football. And then I think, so many schools across the country have their non-revenue sport that is really good. It's like their niche thing, and I think what, makes those schools motivated to put more money to those sports is going to be valuable. I know Jarret at Texas Tech, they've had a pretty good college baseball program for a long time. And of course, Arizona State historically has been a really good college baseball program. Now they've kind of fallen on hard times over the last few years with some NCAA stuff out there at Arizona State in baseball, but they're expecting to not be scholarship limits with sports anymore and instead roster limits. I think you could see schools that care a lot about certain sports, put more resources to those sports being successful, because now they're going to have the ability to do that. And I think, in a perfect world, you'd love to see a conference kind of step in and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And this is going to be how every member of the league chooses to operate. But I think what we've kind of seen over, the last several years here and the last few years in college athletics is that people want to operate their own way, whether that's the schools, whether that's the athletes. People want to do what's in their own best interest, because that's what generates the most revenue for that individual entity, whether it's a player, a coach, or a school, or the athletic department overall. So I think that, at least in my opinion, that's how it's going to end up going. But I don't think anyone has a full picture of how the House settlement is really going to affect each school, each conference, because, as the settlement terms have been agreed to, they haven't been approved by the judge yet. So
right.
A lot of unknown to it, whether it's Title IX, like Jarret said, or even just how it's going to be distributed in the roster limits. There's just so much unknown about the House settlement overall and where it's going to lead college sports. But one thing I do feel confident saying is that it's a better system than what it was for the last 100 years. Like, the athletes deserve getting revenue, no doubt, in my opinion. So while it's new and while it's uncomfortable and there's a lot of questions, in my opinion, it's a better setup. And certainly athletes are deserving of some sort of the revenue cut.
Right. We had North Carolina on yesterday, and we talked to them a little bit, about this as well, because they were talking about some of their shortfalls that their athletic program actually had. And that's why, the athletic director and the board of trustees, they were kind of going back and forth with each other and kind of butting heads, because they're like, hey, where's all this money going? If you want saying that you want to give the ACC a chance, but at the same time, if another conference is offering us more, we got to go there. So my question for both of you, and this is kind of, you alluded to this a little bit, Alec, school wanting to put more money towards a football program or towards a basketball program, depending on which institution we're talking about. Let's take both of your schools collectively. I think, are they going to have to choose one over the other? Because as you mentioned, like Kansas, they would like to put more revenue towards basketball than anything else. Are schools going to now have to start choosing, because like an Iowa State, a Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, a Kansas State, where they want to try to allocate, obviously you put more towards football, but they want to be really good in both. Well, are you going to be able to do that now at some of these schools?
I think it just comes down to being responsible spenders. I know Texas A&M's athletic director, Trev Alberts, said last week or 2 weeks ago, something along the lines of, college athletics doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a dumb spending problem. Look at all the ways that colleges and athletic departments waste money on things that they don't need to spend money on. The facilities race a decade ago was silly. Clemson has a water slide in the lobby of their football facility. It's the biggest waste of money ever to have a regular slide just like sitting in your facility. I don't think you're going to see schools continue to put money to things that don't need to be upgraded. Every now and then you might see new equipment thrown into a weight room, but I don't think you're going to see brand new weight rooms built, because now schools have to, put $20 million aside roughly annually. In all honesty, as a salary floor, it's not a salary cap as much as NCAA and the House settlement likes to make it sound. It's not a cap.
No.
I don't anticipate it being a cap. They're just not going to spend money on things that they don't have to spend money on. I think in football programs, you see, 4 or 5 different people on a high school recruiting staff, or like director of high school recruiting. Like, I think you're probably going to see 1 or 2 of those roles reduced across the country. If you're one of those like assistant or associate athletic directors in an athletic department and you have some crazy job title that you can't explain within a couple of sentences, you might lose your opportunity to continue to be employed there, because you're an expensive employee that's being paid couple $100,000 a year, maybe.
Right.
Those are all things that are going to be cut back, I think, in the next few years in college athletics. And those extra dollars do go a long way when they all add up, and it allows schools to kind of, distribute and assign dollars to where they want them to go. And I think that just because there's so much unknown about what the House case is going to do, at least in my opinion at this point, like, I don't even think athletic directors actually know how they're going to do this. I don't think their CFOs and their COOs in the athletic departments know how they're going to figure it out, but they're going to figure it out at some point because they have to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think wholeheartedly. I mean, I would be thinking that they've been trying to figure this out for the last, I don't know, maybe year to 18 months. That something has been put in place. They didn't just start, or let me backtrack. They shouldn't have just started trying to figure this thing out. But as you said earlier, it's, a lot of times these schools, they just waste money and spend money. Sometimes they're not forward thinkers as well. And I think that a lot of this is where we've gotten into this problem, is because people weren't forward thinkers on a lot of this stuff, Jarret, and they just, we'll just wait and be reactive. Well, look what happened to the Pac-12. They were trying to be reactive, and it's no more. And I think the more people that get out there and they become more forward thinkers with all of this stuff, and not just necessarily get out in front of it, but just start thinking about it as a whole and just understanding where everything is going. And don't put your head in the sand and just hope something changes. That's not going to work. And I'm afraid if the NCAA, well, I shouldn't say I'm afraid, if the NCAA continues to go down that path of just, well, we'll just wait and see what happens, I got a feeling, Jarret, schools are just going to get together. These conferences are going to get together and just say, yeah, too bad, so sad, NCAA, we're out of here and we don't need you anymore.
No, I think in football, you're right. I don't know about basketball, but I think college football is definitely heading toward separating from the NCAA. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, NCAA's hadn't had a lot of pull in college football in a while. Now, March Madness, NCAA tournament, basketball, that's a whole different thing. Now, the NCAA did actually help themselves with this 10-year payout. I mean,
right.
At least keeps itself relevant for 10 years, right? I believe that's the length of the payout. So even though they're going to have to spend a lot of money paying this off, it does at least keep them in the picture, I would think. Right. At least in theory. A couple of things, Alex, that I want to piggyback off of is, or one of y'all said about Trev Alberts saying there's a spending problem. I think that's funny coming from him. I actually read here somewhere that there's I want to give attribution, but I can't remember who exactly it was, but $200 million in buyout money to coaches over the last year or so. That's a lot of money. I mean, these coaches have been making. And also piggybacking off what Alex said, I agree. I think these players who are out there performing, generating this revenue for not just the schools and the athletic programs, but the communities, people like us who are at least attempting to make a living, talking about these sports and these players they're playing. It's how hypocritical would it be for someone like me to be like, oh, these players, they should just be happy with their scholarship and their stipend. I mean, come on. That's not very capitalistic. It seems un-American to me. So I don't know what exactly the right system is, but I know that seemed wrong to me. Ever since I was old enough to understand what was going on, the difference between college and pro athletes,
right.
With knowing how popular college sports are. In terms of forward thinking, yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not smart enough. There's got to be somebody smarter than me out there to be able to predict the future in terms of what a good system would look like. I think there's most of the changes have been going towards players. And then it seems like people who are already making a lot of money off college athletics. It seems like that's, and then the TV contracts, headed towards super conferences, all that. And you mentioned the conferences getting together. My problem is, what solidarity are there in conferences right now? I think there's less solidarity in terms of like, I'll just say Texas Tech and Iowa State, because that's who we're talking about. Let's say, just using them as hypotheticals, they go to the Big 12 meeting. They're big times leaders in the conference. They're preaching solidarity. But then if the Big 10 or SEC come a-calling, offering, like the North Carolina guy said, you mentioned, Brien, a lot of money, how do you not take that? When you're talking about, and as Alex said, staff's going to get cut. I mean, that's just the bottom line. They're going to, and it's going to be not just in recruiting personnel, but just all these people behind the scenes that do a lot of things for these athletic departments that don't ever get any pub. There's going to be there's going to be some really tough decisions from these athletic departments to make, and some sad decisions. So how do you, in good faith, go to the conference and say, hey, let's all be together, but then turn down that money, which could mean you having to lay off people that you care about and their families? It doesn't make sense. So no. I'm with Alec. I think everybody's got to look out for themselves to a degree, and I think it's going to be really hard. I think more and more moving forward for conferences to do a lot of things together in the name of solidarity.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, everybody in the Big 12 right now, well, I say everybody, we think they all want to be a part of this until somebody comes calling, and if that day ever happens, it is what it is. But we've discussed a couple of different times that, especially in football, when you don't have a blue blood out there, the strength has got to be in the numbers. The strength has got to be the solidarity of the conference. Now, you can say that's football only, but football is what's driving this whole thing. So I know a lot of people get mad at people like us because we constantly talk about football, and football is not the only sport, but I'm sorry, football is what is the driver in all of this. It's what's making the money. So when you're talking in generalities, usually we're just talking about football. So because that's what's driving this. But for the Big 12 as a whole, and I'm curious to see what you guys think, is it important that they, especially in these times right now, look, yes, anybody can get picked off. We understand that part. But do you think it's important that we have to put together a united front and be strong with it? Because if not, who knows what could happen? Because I have a feeling if the Big 10 wanted, or the SEC wanted, and they saw any weakness and they thought, you know what, we can pick this, and just get rid of them all together, they would. But maybe if we have a strong enough conference, especially if we if they can get the basketball contract involved, maybe the Big 12 sticks together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not like a full-blown expert on a lot of this stuff, but I think one thing that stands out to me in just like reading and absorbing content back from the Pac-12's kind of demise is so many of those schools had different motivations about what they want to be, whether it was athletic supremacy or academic supremacy, combining the two, which I think in an ideal world is the goal of every institution's board of trustees, president, chancellor, whatever it may be. And there's different schools had different ideals out there, and USC wanted to do different things than Cal maybe did. And, I think one of the reasons why the Big 12 was able to kind of survive the departure of Texas and Oklahoma was because the 8 schools that remained are pretty like institutions. None of them are objectively, elite public Ivy schools. None of them are showing up in the top 15, 20, 30 of, the U.S. News, Public World Report, whatever it is, education rankings or university rankings. And, athletically, a lot of them are pretty similar too. None of them are competing for a national championship like you kind of said in football, because they don't really have the resources to do that and compete with, some of the richest and wealthiest programs who have the fortunes of strong program history, but also just access to talent around them. So I think one of the reasons why the Big 12 was able to kind of survive that was because there was so much opinions, I guess, on how to get through that challenging time, in my opinion. So I think it's important for people in the Big 12 to continue to stay within that mindset amongst the chancellors and the presidents and the athletic directors. Because if you don't, then you start to see different groups and different people get disgruntled. And in my opinion, without any direct insight into, those board meetings and those town halls, whatever you want to call them, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, decade in the Pac-12, I don't know if that alignment was always there. And I think that that's important in the Big 12 moving forward.
Absolutely.
I want to jump in real quick, Brian. I'm sorry, just real quick, piggyback. I think also the Big 12 survived, unlike the Pac-12, because, like you said, they were proactive. They went and added those schools from that Pac-12 and gave them basically a offer they couldn't refuse. If you want to remain relevant, come join us. If not, then okay, good luck. You got to give your mark, and the powers that be and some of these athletic directors and presidents, you got to tip the cap to being proactive in expanding instead of just standing pat and hoping for the best, which seems like the Pac-12 did. So I think that's a big part of it. Also, I think the best thing that could happen to Big 12 football is just parity. I mean, there's no big helmet school in the Big 12. Well, instead of that just being some big weakness, have these wild competitive games. Maybe Kansas jumps up and is a big, buys for the Big 12 title, or, just someone out of the blue. I think that's the best case scenario, is that wild, fun, competitive games in the Big 12 this year.
Right. They also got to go win some of those playoff games too and go be competitive. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor with Synergy Financial Partners.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley with Alec Busse and Jarret Johnson. So, we covered a lot, in that first segment there. So I appreciate, again, you guys taking the time today. So one thing that at the end, we were talking about, the competitive balance, and we've talked about it before. I think it's very important. One thing we talked about, the demise of the Pac-12 too, is it looked like the Pac-12, like while they were separate and all had different agendas, it also looked like the Pac-12, their commissioner had a different agenda and sat back on his laurels and was waiting for a bigger deal as far as a TV deal than what was actually on the table. And then when that deal got pulled out from underneath them, that was the end of it, versus taking it where the Big 12 said, okay, this is what we're doing. Fine. We'll add these schools. We're moving forward. So leadership everywhere, especially at the top and at the conference, is very, very important. That's why I like the fact that we keep talking about, the Big 12 keeps talking about getting its own network. How important do you guys think that would be? If it's TNT, TBS, whatever the case may be, if that could become part of the Big 12 package?
I'll be honest, I haven't seen anything about the Big 12 trying to get its own network, or read anything about it. So I don't know how much I can comment on it. I will say that, I think if it was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now.
Right.
We know that the Big 12's primary TV partner is ESPN, and ESPN isn't willing to give the SEC more money to advance its schedule to 9 SEC games every year annually in football. So I don't know if I can see them throwing a ton of money towards building a new network. Now, I don't know how expensive that is. I don't know the bandwidth that it costs to kind of build a network and the programming for it. So I don't know a lot of the details behind that. Maybe you know more about it than I do, Jarret.
No, I really don't. That was going to be my answer as well. I mean, ESPN Plus seems to be kind of where Big 12 lives, is kind of like if you're not on a big network or something like that, you're on ESPN Plus. I don't know the details in terms of the agreement. I think the Pac-12 had its own network and it didn't work out, so I don't know if that's a key or not. And I don't know if that would hurt like the next negotiation. I don't feel like I have enough understanding of where that's at right now, and I haven't heard anything. I get asked that by Texas Tech fans. Now that Texas had the Longhorn network and that kind of stopped the Big 12 network from happening. What's to keep it from happening now? And that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. And like Alex said, I don't know what all that entails in terms of what kind of investment that would take and if that would help these Big 12 schools or not.
If they could get it for basketball, I think it would help. If we could somehow piggyback off of what the NBA was doing, since it's apparently going to be leaving TNT, if the Big 12 can somehow slide in there and pick up viewers with that and put something together with that, I think that would be a good idea.
how big would, I mean, just objectively stepping back, like we love Big 12 conference basketball, but I would say the average college basketball fan really pays attention mostly in March, right? I'm just
Right.
wondering what kind of viewership that would get. The Big 12, like I can't wait. I mean, I was just looking at, with the new schools and everything, like this is crazy how good Big 12 basketball is going to be next year. But in terms of today's society, how distracted we all are, how many options you have to with your time, how many viewers and what part of the calendar? You're talking about February through maybe,
March.
mid-March or mid-April, I mean, at best. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I was an executive, if I would do that or not. It would be great during that stretch, but what are you going to do for programming the rest of the time, the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think I've always been really skeptical of everything Yormark has said about the idea of selling basketball rights separate from football rights. I think if that was possible, another league would have done it by now or tried to have done it by now. If it was fiscally responsible, I think another league would have tried to have done it by now. And no one has tried to do it. And I think the reason that is because it's not a smart financial decision. And I don't think the Big 12 is ever actually going to do it. Because I don't think enough people watch college basketball on Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights, even Saturday afternoons. It doesn't draw an audience in like college football does. And I mean, you can just look at the numbers and you can look at the data to support that. And it's not just college basketball. I mean, it's NBA regular season games. Draw the audience that, and I'm not even an NBA fan. So like I fit into this perfectly in my opinion. Like I barely come around for the NBA playoffs. Like I might watch a little bit of the NBA playoffs here and there, but I don't watch the NBA regular season at all. And if I'm not watching the NBA regular season, I don't think you're going to get somebody who is just a casual college basketball fan who may turn on in March, like Jarret said, when most fans come around to tune into a Big 12 basketball channel or TV package that exists exclusively for that kind of broadcasting. I just don't think it's feasible for any league in college basketball, but that obviously includes the Big 12. And I just think in general, like taking what a lot of these people that are speaking nationally about like the college sports executives, taking what they say, whether it's a conference commissioner, the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, taking what they say with a grain of salt and like really kind of trying to like call BS on what they're saying is really valuable. And to be honest, like I think that all of them are really guilty of saying things that maybe don't always come true. And just like reading between the lines on different things they've said is always important.
Yeah.
Off both of what y'all said, just big picture, it's college football. I mean, whether it be resource allocation, whatever, Alec, you mentioned Texas baseball. It has been a great program for a long time, but it's still a very much a niche sport. You could say college basketball, the way it is a big niche sport with a very small amount of time in the calendar that dominates people's attention. Even at schools like Iowa State, who's been very good for quite some time, and Texas Tech, who's been very good here recently. So don't get me wrong, there are diehards. There's fans watching this like, no, but the people that are talking about these other sports, fiscally, they don't really matter. And that's just the truth. It's college football, a little bit college basketball, and then everything else really doesn't matter when it comes to money.
Well, and I would just urge people, like, go watch the 30 for 30 Requiem for the Big East. It's an age documentary that 30 for 30 did 10, 15 years ago, maybe at this point. But the Big East was a basketball league in the 80s. Obviously, I'm not old enough to remember that. I'm 24. But like people that are older than I am, my dad, my uncles, you guys, I'm sure, loved watching Big East basketball when it was Syracuse, UConn, St. John's, Villanova, all of those schools. And then what did they try and do? They tried to bring in football because it wasn't generating enough revenue. And what did that do to the Big East? All of those basketball schools blew up and the league blew up, and half of them went to the ACC and half of them went to the American. And now the Big East is back, and it's all of the schools that are in the Big East are the ones that don't have a football team that plays FBS football. Like Syracuse belongs in the Big East for basketball based off of when they were their most successful, when they were a great program. That's where they won a national title in 2003 when they had Carmelo Anthony. But Syracuse wants to play competitive football, so they're in the ACC. UConn thought they wanted to play competitive football, so they went to the American. And then they realized, you know what, we don't really care about playing competitive football. We're just going to be an independent, and our basketball team's going to go back to the American, or excuse me, the Big East. I think this is just a really good example of, like, you can't generate enough revenue just being a basketball league. And I think that while the documentary in some senses is maybe a little bit aged, like, a lot of those same principles still hold true today, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it explains exactly what happened with the Big East. And because they had a couple of schools in there that played football and they tried to appease them. And when they did appease them, the next thing you know, it blew up. They needed more football and they needed more football. And then away it went. And that was the end of it. So I appreciate you guys taking the time today. You know, I know that's, like you mentioned, Alec, there's a lot going on right now in the athletic sports world. So I appreciate you guys making the time, filling up our content days here today. So we will bring you guys back as soon as we possibly can. So I appreciate you guys making the time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Big B, always enjoy being on the show, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. Hey, by the way, Jarret, we're going to take one quick break here, but stick around. I have a question for you when the show's over. So just stick around real quick. We'll be right back. With one word from our sponsors at Synergy Financial.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for coming on and watching and paying attention to our channel here. We are growing as fast as we possibly can, and it's because of you guys. I just wanted to send a quick shout out and thank you guys for taking the time. You always leave a lot of comments in the comment section in the videos. Please continue to do that. Remember to subscribe. We are just so close to 1,000. We got to get to that number. Trying to get there by the end of this month, if not sooner. So please continue to subscribe. Tell your friends to do the same. We will be back tomorrow. It'll be Fitz tomorrow. I am not able to do the show tomorrow, but I'll be back on Friday. So we appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. And this is the Big 12 Insiders.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.